that you never thought possible. And it'll get you away from playing things and losing yourself in scalier kinds of things. It doesn't mean that you don't play diatonically or chromatically, because you do in some cases. In fact, I have a lot of examples that use those things. And one of the things that I wanted to really do in this book was I didn't want to say, okay, here's David Becker lick 5 and number 9. I sat down and said, okay, these are the shapes that I could use for a G7. Let me find a couple here, and I'm going to write them down. So I took the very first example for G7 is taking a B diminished here, going to a C, to a D minor. And if you listen to the sound of it, you have all the chord tones. But you also have extensions of those chord tones, which allow you to get other types of things. So it's kind of like if I'm going to spell a word and I want to get some other colors into that word, or I want to get some paint and paint a wall and add some different colors. I don't have to play just the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. I can add some extensions to it. But if I know that they lie in these particular sounds, then it's easier for me to get those sounds. Now, here's an interesting one. Here's one that's not in the diatonic system, but it actually works well because it works chromatically. If I take that same motion that I just had and I move the 5th up here to A minor, and then I go to the F. But when I go to the F, I'm going to just raise the 5th up a half step, and I'm going to get this augmented chord. And this augmented chord is very interesting because if I raise the 5th again, I'm back to D minor, so I haven't really lost anything. It's an extra chord here. But what it does, it allows me to have this sound that works very well for G7 flat 5. And if I use this, get that sound, you can also see that if I took this and I lowered the root, because we're going to consider this to be F augmented, I have an A major. Now an A major is really nice for a 7 flat 5 chord. So it actually allows you to use some sounds that you wouldn't think of. And here's a version of that. If I'm just going to disperse the triad here, use a lot of open strings, which a lot of guys avoid, but I love using them. So I get that sound that I want to have. And it also works well for if I'm going to play a half diminished. Because a lot of people think of the half diminished, they go, okay, well, I got to play this particular scale and move it here and go here. But if you look at that sound, this is a sound that a lot of guys use in jazz, where they play like this kind of sound. And you get that as your resolution. So I'm going to use, just out of the chord shape, I'm going to play a line for a 2-5-1. So I'll do the same thing again. Now, what I didn't tell you is this shape here, this augmented shape, if I move it down a half step, or I move it up a minor 3rd, it's actually the augmented chord that's in the relative minor triads that we have from A minor. Because what happens is when we go to A minor, the chord scale in A minor is A minor major 7 as the 1 chord, B half diminished as the 2 chord, C major 7 sharp 5 as the 3 chord, and then D minor 7, and then E7, because we need that dominant 7 chord. This is all this, church stuff from 1,000 years ago. And to give us that sound, we have to raise the G to a G sharp, or A flat, however you want to call it. And that actually brings in some other sounds. So now we have A minor, do the same movement that I did in the majors. Raise the 5th, I have F. Raise it again, I have D minor. If I raise it again, I'm B diminished. Now when I raise it again, I've got G sharp diminished. So I've got 2 diminished triads. Not to be confused with the full diminished 7 chord that you can move up in minor 3rds, but these two actually have different notes in them. There's 2 common tones, but there's 1 note difference, and it makes a big difference in terms of the tonality, although they do function the same way. So then when I raise it again here from this G sharp diminished, I get E major now instead of E minor. And that's a nice sound too, because if you're going to play that E major over a G, you get that G13 flat 9. It's a great sound for a dominant chord. If I'm playing G7, I can... So, but I always have to keep in mind that I want to always go back to the chord shape that I'm playing off of, and in this case, the E has 2 of the notes that are in that chord, the 13 and 3rd, but I've got this, the G sharp. So, and then when I get back here, I've got, raise it again, I've got C augmented. And the C augmented is that chord that we went down to from, went up to here. So I can play 2-5-1 using, and this is actually good for a lot of you guys that are rock guys that are trying to get into playing jazz. First of all, I want to say a very important statement. There are no jazz chords. There just aren't. There are chord voicings that are preferred in a lot of the jazz kinds of tunes. You got to remember, all these standards were written at the time from great pop composers who had a great understanding of harmony. They could write things like symphonies, and they could also write these popular tunes of the day. So they had a great understanding of harmony. And if you really want to better your understanding of harmony, you don't have to go buy 16 books. What you need to do is understand what's inside of a chord. And the more you understand what's inside of a chord, and you start to break the chord up, you'll start to see lines that come right out of your chord shapes that will go right into your, whatever diatonic stuff you've worked on scale-wise, don't throw it away. Incorporate it into the chord shapes. Find out what's going on when you're playing a scale pattern. Like, look and see, oh, okay, there's the F, okay, there's the D minor, there's the B diminished, because it'll really help you to get yourself locked into playing less of a diatonic kind of, you know, let's say autopilot, and you'll start to understand where the notes are that you want to play. And that's why you'll have the freedom to play whatever you want to play if you start to see how things are built here as well as here.